Hello, everyone, and welcome to Her Vision, Her Voice, a show where we celebrate the bold and powerful voices of women, women of color, and women in the LGBTQ community who are redefining the music and film industries. I'm your host, Nicole Bilzerian, and in each episode, we'll dive into conversations with trailblazers who have turned obstacles into opportunities using their vision to amplify their voices and inspire change. Today, I will be joined by Nicole Bilzerian in the second hour of the show. Nicole is a powerhouse music executive turned entrepreneur. Over 2 decades in the industry, she's overseen global campaigns, built teams, and helped launch some of the most influential artists of our time, from J. Cole and Juice WRLD to Olivia Rodrigo's record-breaking debut. After serving as executive vice president at Geffen Records, Nicole founded her own company, EIGHTYONEB, where she's now shaping bold partnerships with brands like Nickelodeon, Rebel Music, and Gamma. Beyond her career, she's been navigating the journey of building a business while also walking through her fertility story. A reminder that her path is about much more than just music. All right. If you are just tuning in, I am Nicole Bilzerian. This is Her Vision, Her Voice, and I am happy to say that I am now joined in the studio by Nicole Bilzerian. Nicole, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We were chatting it up over the break, and I'm just super excited to have you here. It's actually a real honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
Especially as an Armenian, having another Armenian on the show. You're actually the first Armenian I've had on the show.
Really?
Yeah. So it's just really great to have you here.
Awesome.
Nicole, I always like to start off the show by asking my guests what their origin story is. So when you look back on your life and growing up, you know, the environment that you were surrounded by and maybe even certain moments in your life where it felt like a quiet sort of like, here's something that is interesting for me. What were those moments for you that ultimately set you on the path that you're on now, working in the music industry and having had so much experience working in the industry as well?
So I grew up in a music-friendly household. I grew up as a big fan of hip hop and R&B, but my family was playing music of all kinds. But I was always just a fan. And there's definitely one moment that completely changed the trajectory of what I do now and led me into this path, which was I went to school in New York at Fordham University in the Bronx, and I was a political science major. So there was no working in the music business aspiration at that point. But I needed an internship when I was in school, and my dad happened to know this gentleman named Glenn Gardner, who happened to work at a radio station in Madison, Wisconsin. And he knew someone at RCA in New York who he put me in touch with for their internship program. And for me, it was just, I need an internship. It's in New York. This sounds great. So I applied for the internship program and I got it. And then sheer luck, I was placed in the as the intern to the assistant to the chairman of the company, who at the time was Bob Jameson. And so for that summer, I sat next to her right outside his office, and I got to see the behind the scenes of a record label. I mean, I had no idea that working in the music but not being the artist was actually a job. Like, zero idea. I was so naive. So I learned a ton from that experience, obviously. And from that moment, I knew, I'm going to work in the music business. So I went back to college that fall, changed my major to Spanish studies, which is a whole other story, and then got another internship. And that internship, by sheer luck, completely changed what I do for a living now.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And you had no knowledge of there even being an opportunity of working in the industry.
No. I either didn't think about it, or like it just never dawned on me that, you know, you need people to work at radio to put records on the radio. You need people to create television spots to put them on air, to book the airtime. You need people who can set up the show for an artist to go on tour. Like, I just thought this stuff happened.
Yeah, just magic.
Like, and then I was like, oh no, there's like actually people behind the scenes who do that.
Yeah. I mean, I have a very similar sort of story too, and in just being so obsessed with album artwork, but not knowing who made the artwork that I was so infatuated by as a kid, and then slowly understanding as I actually got into the industry. So it makes sense because it's not something that really, I don't know if this was your experience, considering that you came from a music-friendly household, which was the same case for me, but my parents still, I think, preferred that I worked, as a doctor or a lawyer or something that felt a little bit more stable, even though they were super supportive of me pursuing the arts. So was that kind of a similar thing for you too, do you think?
In the beginning, I think my family, they were always very supportive of pretty much anything I wanted to do, but I definitely think they thought this was a phase. I think they were like, oh yeah, that's cute. Like, she's a fan and she's going to work in the music business. But when they realized that I was more serious about it, they fully supported me. My graduation present, my college graduation present from my grandparents was they were going to pay my rent for 3 months in New York. I was living in the Bronx, and they said, okay, we'll pay your rent for the summer that you graduate. And in those 3 months, you need to get a job in New York, or, you come home. So, that shows that they were supportive of me trying to make this, a job.
Absolutely.
Lo and behold, that summer, as much as I interviewed and temped, I did not walk away with a full-time job. So I moved home for a few months. But then that fall, I actually got a call to come back to New York. And I did, which ended up, becoming my first official job in the music business. But they always did support what I wanted to do once they saw like I was serious about it.
Yeah. So that first job was Jive Records.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So what was that transition like from, doing these internships, going on these interviews, temping, nothing really working out in that period of time, and then all of a sudden you get a call back, you go to New York, you land this job, and all of a sudden you're in the major label world.
Yeah.
Was there a learning curve for you, or did it kind of naturally transition?
I think I had a little bit of, what's the word? Like knowledge of like kind of what it was just from my 2 internships. But the whole thing was a huge learning curve because I didn't go to school for music. I'm not a musician myself. I didn't go to business school. I did not major in marketing. So all of like the seemingly textbook classes that one would take if they were going to go do this, I took none of them. So everything was a learning curve for me, but it was almost just like on the job experience that I kind of rolled with it.
Do you think now that you're looking back on that time, do you think that even if you were given the opportunity to go back to school and take the typical sort of classes that any person would take now, do you think you would have chosen that, or would you still have chosen the path of, I'm just going to dive in head first and just learn on the job?
I think I would. I don't think I would change it. I think I would go the path that I did because, as most people know, in the music business, you don't necessarily have to have a degree in anything related to music, right?
Right.
But there are things now that I find interesting and I like to do and fascinating that are part of the business that back then I was like, oh, absolutely not. Finance being one of them. Like, I knew I never wanted to go into finance, didn't want to know about a budget, don't want to know how the stock market works. Like, I had no interest because that's what my dad did for a living. But now, I use budgets and spreadsheets every day, and I think they're cool. Yeah. I don't know that I would go back to school for that, but my taste has changed a bit.
Yeah. So when you think about that time at Jive Records, what would you say are some of the lessons or the values that you learned during your time there?
There's a lot of lessons and a lot of values that, kind of stand the test of time. But I think one of them, actually, there's 2 good examples. One from my internship and then one from literally the first day of my first job. Can I give you 2?
Please. Even better.
So, no, but in my internship, the second one at RCA, it was in the marketing department. And this was in the height of like street teams and physical goods being made for street teams to pass out. And one of the marketing directors had made these like business cards with information on them for a band that they had at the time called Clockwise. And when the 10,000 cards came to the office, the URL was wrong.
Oh, no.
It was like a typo. So someone didn't proofread the copy.
Clearly.
And instead of reordering 10,000 more cards, they ordered 10,000 stickers that were like literally thin, skinny lines of just the URL. And they gave me and a couple other interns some pizzas in the conference room and said, can you sticker all these 10,000 cards? And we did it, of course. But that lesson was like, proofread everything, reread your emails. Like I became obsessed with making sure there weren't mistakes. Obviously, we all make mistakes. But that lesson, I was like, oh, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
So that was one lesson, but in terms of Jive specifically, the first day of work, I showed up and my boss said, "Do you have a license?" And this is in New York City, and I said, "Yeah, I have a license." And she said, "Great. We need you to drive Dina Lohan's Suburban around the block while we take our meeting with her and Lindsay, because the garage at the end of the block is full and there's nowhere for them to park their car." Oh. And I was like, okay. So I literally drove their car around in circles while they took their meeting. Now, obviously terrifying, because like, who wants to drive a Suburban in New York City? But it was just like, that wasn't in my job description, but you just do it. It's just like, I think one thing you have to do, probably in a lot of businesses, but particularly this one, is so many things come your way that aren't the job description. And you just have to take initiative and do them. Obviously, it kind of goes without saying, like, nothing that compromises like your morals and values and all that. But you just do the deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the line that you draw, is if it goes against your morals or values, right, then, but otherwise it's kind of a free form type. It doesn't matter what kind of position you have. Yeah. It's anything can come up and you still have to kind of go with it.
Yeah.
So those were you, would you say that those were seminal learning lessons for you that you carry through now into your phase of being an entrepreneur?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Attention to detail,
organization, all of that is a complete fundamental and foundation for me. And then, taking advantage of the opportunities when maybe something isn't your job to do, but now you have the knowledge on how to do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've managed hundreds of projects each year, and you've worked with so many different artists. And I'm just wondering how you're able to keep your work from feeling, like purely sort of operational, and you still get to stay creative, and you're still having that opportunity to interact with the artists and just be in that sort of zone.
It's definitely a conscious choice, particularly when I first started kind of climbing the corporate ladder. You have to balance wanting to stay close to the creative, but proving yourself as like a respected leader. And that often comes with more, operating tasks, managing people, managing budgets, things that aren't necessarily creative. But I strongly believe, and it's really the foundation of my business now, that the best and biggest success comes from operators and creatives working together. So I think it's a conscious choice to stay close to the art, but then surrounding yourself with people that are kind of going to play their roles. At my last gig at Geffen, I don't want to say relied on, but like we forged a lot of partnerships with our joint ventures and really had strong relationships with them, where they kind of came to us with the creative, or they signed the talent. So, we had artists that were signed directly to us, like Olivia Rodrigo, but then we had other artists that came through a joint venture, like, BTS through Hybe, or Rob 49 through Rebel, or, Yeet through Zach Bia. And they were the ones that kind of found that talent, dictated the sound for the most part, helped with the branding, of course. And then we made sure that each of them were surrounded by the right team members to roll out whatever we were rolling out at the time. So I think it's a team effort for sure, but it's a conscious choice to not just become like I'm going to sit in the office all day and never be out there with the artists. Like you have to do both.
Yeah. Would you say that the industry that you entered at the time that you entered was different, similar to what we're experiencing now? Like what are some of the things that you are seeing now that maybe has gotten better or hasn't? Or
it was definitely different for a variety of reasons. I mean, one, just the sheer speed to market was different. We were printing physical goods back then, cassettes, vinyl, CDs. So the time was much longer. It also meant that artists had to commit to the art sooner because you needed the window to print the goods, right? Now we can release music within days. I don't recommend that approach, but you can do it. So that was very different. And I think the way that music was created is different. I'm not an A&R, never have been and never will be. But at that point, because of the way music was made, there was just more, more weight put into like the collective in the studio. Now, a lot of artists make the music on their own. They make it at home studios. There's just a variety of ways that the music gets made now. The way that we market is different. Like I said, I think there still has to be a connection to people and human beings. There has to be the tangible, in real life experience. But a lot of what we do is online now. So just the way that we market is just very different.
Yeah.
So it is different. I think it's better in most ways. There's a few things I wish were different. Like I think that there's less quality control now because there's just so much speed to market. And while it is, lower barrier to entry and everyone has the ability to like express their art in music form, it also means that like a lot of shit gets put out there.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that we have to be conscious of, but by and large, I mean, it's gotten better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that I'm curious to know, at least from your perspective, is, music from the outside, I think to a lot of people seems very flashy and really cool. And, you're someone who's worked with really big artists.
Yep.
But that's not the end all be all of who you are as an individual and your likes and dislikes and all the things that make up who you are. So when you look back at your time at working at Geffen, at working at Jive, and ultimately coming to a place where you feel like you want to take that entrepreneurial leap, what are some things that you want people to know about you as a person that might not be something that people really think about when they just look at, posts on social media about you or anything like that?
I mean, well, there's a few things. Music is a great business to be in. There are a lot of perks. It is great in many ways, but the day-to-day is not very flashy, as you know. There's obviously long hours. There's wild conversations about the most absurd things sometimes. And it's nonstop. I can't tell you how many times, I go home for the holidays to see my family. I'm still working. I've been on vacation all over the world and I'm still working. You're just always on. And while I do think, everyone strives for this work-life balance and sometimes you can get glimpses of that, there's really never a break. I literally just went to Europe with my son over the summer just for 2 weeks, and it was a working trip. So I'm managing, watching him and doing Zooms at 9 p.m. because of the time difference here. And, it's not all flash. So I think that's one thing to know. Like if you're going to get in this business, you have to really love it because you're going to be working a lot. And in terms of, what I would like people to know about me, the reason that I started my business, 81B, is because I really want to help creatives operate their businesses more efficiently. And with that means doing good business, having integrity, giving people options, rather than dictating to them, like, you have to do it this way, explaining the options and what the potential outcomes could be. So I think I just want people to know where I'm coming from. Like, that's my goal, right? To do business with integrity and to make sure that artists feel supported rather than, told what to do, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect transition because I actually wanted to ask you about now transitioning into 81B, starting this company, and also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but having your child and knowing how to, again, it's like everybody wants to have that work-life balance, but oftentimes it could be so difficult because this industry is just so constant all the time.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, making that transition from working, within the music industry, you're working for a company, to then now you're an entrepreneur, you've started your own business, 81B. What were some things that you had to, unlearn, or maybe certain habits you had, or, certain ways of operating and working that you were so used to in your life working for a company that you, again, had to shift, and you had to be able to think about things a little bit differently in starting your own company? What were some of those things?
A lot of the operational pieces and the systems and the process, I actually took with me as assets. Like, that's how I operate just as a person and in business. But there were a couple things that I had to unlearn. I mean, one is, when you work at a label or at a company, you work the projects that are given to you, you work with the people that your company does business with, and you kind of work what you're given. Obviously, a lot of times that's great. Sometimes it's not. But when you're an entrepreneur, you work with whatever business you create. So I was lucky that in my first year of launching my company, my biggest most long-standing partners were people that I knew. I kind of got that business off of the relationships that I had, but no one's giving you projects or business. You have to really go out there and get the business yourself, which is definitely a transition when you work for yourself, right? But I think the biggest transition, because I kind of knew that coming in, like, I was like, okay, Nicole, like, this is all on you now. You got to figure it out. But the biggest transition for me that I had to unlearn, that I didn't realize I had to unlearn until I was in it, is, and I honestly don't even know how to articulate this great, but it was like perpetually being humble and, everything. When you work at a big company, you have a massive team. So it's always a team effort. There's always a lot of people who played a part in whatever success you had. And for 20 years, I was like I was trained in my brain to be like, oh, well, we did this and so was this person and so did that piece, to make sure that everyone got the credit. And God forbid you ever say you yourself did something, right? And I understand why, because it is a team effort, right? That's the truth. But that made it so difficult for me to then talk about myself to get business. I hate talking about myself, to be honest, right? But you have to promote your business. You have to promote yourself. You have to promote your wins. You have to tell people why they should work with you. And that has been a huge challenge for me, probably the biggest challenge in these last 2 years. And again, I've been fortunate that my company has done very well in the first 2 years because of the relationships that I had and that I've built over 20 years. But it's very difficult for me to promote my business and promote myself, because it's just something I was always told to do the opposite,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to deprogram and unlearn that.
Yeah. Is there maybe even something about the salesy aspect of it that is
makes
just
me super
like
uncomfortable?
Icky? Yeah, I get that.
Super uncomfortable. Yeah.
But does it keep you on your toes? Do you feel like it keeps you on your toes in a sort of healthy way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And from working with a small business coach to having some really great friends who are my cheerleaders, to watching TikToks of other people doing it. I'm like, okay, you know, I'm turning the corner. I'm like, okay, like we're getting there. We're getting there. And I know it's at the end of the day, like it's business. You have to do it. Yeah. You have to do it. So
yeah. Well, you've also been open to discussing your fertility journey, which I'm very curious to know, because I can't imagine starting a business while also wanting to have a child at the same time and figuring all of that out, and then also making sure that everything is going according to plan, so to speak, is easy, because it couldn't have been. Yeah. So, you know, take me back to that time where you ultimately decided, okay, I want to have a baby now, but I also am going to start this business. And how did you even, like, were you even thinking about the long term, or were you kind of like, I'm going to take this day by day?
I was thinking about the long term for sure, but I had froze my eggs in my mid-30s as a backup plan. The route that I have taken, while I am so grateful and would not change a thing, was not my initial intention. My initial intention was, I'm going to meet the man of my dreams. We'll have a baby. I'm going to have a career. Like, kind of, that was my goal. And I think a lot of people have the goal of doing family with somebody. I still do, right? That's still a desire of mine. But when I got to my late 30s, I made the decision, okay, like, I'm going to do this. And, you know, I remember having a conversation with my doctor, and a few things that she said really just kind of put the battery in my back to be like, okay, you can do this. Like, you're going to do this. I also was very naive to that part of the process, because freezing my eggs was very easy for me. Everyone has a different experience. I only had to do one round. I was very successful. It was, you know, simple. So I thought, the rest of this is going to be simple. And I was very wrong. So it took me 2 years, just over 2 years, and 3 rounds of IVF and 1 miscarriage to get to the end result, which is my son. Wow. And I started that process while I was still at IGA. So my intention was, I'm still going to be working at IGA. I'm going to have a corporate maternity leave. I'm going to have a baby. Everything's going to be great. But through my journey with fertility, and it taking longer than I had expected, which for someone who's A-type personality and when things don't go according to your timetable, you get a little stressed out. It just didn't work out that way. So I ended up leaving for professional reasons, IGA, starting my own business, and then I happened to get pregnant during that process. So I didn't plan to have a baby and start a business at the same time. That's just, I guess, how God wanted it to be. Yeah. So it was a lot to manage, but I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It ended up working out just how it was supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you take me back to even when, before starting your business, what was that spark of, I want to just do my own thing. I'm maybe tired of living this kind of life, or maybe there was just something more that you wanted to be able to accomplish on your own. What was it exactly? Was it something that had been brewing for a while, for a number of years? Or?
Professionally?
Yeah.
It hadn't. So funny enough, I never had a desire to be an entrepreneur, to work for myself. A lot of people do. I was very happy being a good corporate citizen. I had worked my way kind of up the corporate ladder, and what we were doing at Geffen at the time, I was really, really proud of. We had a great team, and I really, really thought that we made an impact. I know we made an impact, right? And then I realized a lot of our business was through these joint ventures, and a lot of the same questions kept coming up on the operational side. Everyone was great with finding talent, creating collaborations, creating the music, coming up with marketing that was moving culture. But when it came down to, what do I use this overhead for? Or how does this budget process work? Or kind of the unsexy stuff, universally we got the same questions were coming to my, coming across my desk. So I was like, there's clearly a need to help creative individuals, companies, operate better because either they don't want to do the boring stuff or they just don't have the resources and infrastructure to do it. So that was what propelled me to kind of start this business the way that I started it.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it was a matter of recognizing certain patterns that ultimately you felt like you could fulfill the goals that, these things that were just missing, that weren't really happening in a way that felt effective overall.
Yeah. And even to be honest, when I left IGA, my initial intention was to actually go in-house at, like a smaller label, a joint venture label, and help them with those things. Because still, I wasn't sold on being an entrepreneur, and it was just more my comfort zone. And for a variety of reasons, that didn't happen. So I kind of was like, okay, how do I continue with this purpose and do what I want to do, just in a different way? And so that's when I started the business, and I said, okay, I can actually do this for multiple people in a variety of ways rather than just one company.
Yeah. Considering that this wasn't something that was brewing for a while, how did you ultimately land on the name? What's the significance of the name?
The name, looking back on it, it was a little stressful, but it happened pretty quickly. So 81B is very, very, I don't want to say boring, but 81 is the year I was born, and B for my last name.
Oh.
And but I will
awesome.
say what sold me on it, and when I told a few people about this when I was testing it out, they loved it. It also, 81B sounds to me like an apartment number.
Sure.
And in New York, which is where I started in music, everything is in apartments. I lived in apartments my whole life there. So it kind of is like a nod back to New York in a way, but it's very like literally me.
Yeah. Well, it kind of sounds like an agency too in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like when I think about that name, it makes me think of an agency. It makes me think of some sort of like creative agency, like a David and Goliath type of situation, which I think is really cool. I mean, I'm curious to know, again, it's like break down just the let's say the specific pillars that make up your company and what you offer, what services you offer to people, and also how you're building relationships with, these different partners in the industry. What does that look like for you?
So in terms of the offering, it kind of depends on what the company or individual needs. I have one partner who has artists, but does not have the infrastructure or the label services people to roll the music out. So for that partner, they brought me in to assemble and manage a kind of what I call like an indie label services team, marketing person, digital person, someone to plug DSPs, press, and that team helps execute the rollout of their artists. Another partner of mine has a full staff, so they don't really need those services. They just need someone to help operate and build better business practices within their existing infrastructure. So, budgeting, mentorship, building systems and process for how the company works, those types of things. So it's a pretty well-rounded company. Anything operationally you kind of get from 81B. Because I come from a marketing background, marketing is just kind of part of the package because that's how my brain works. But it's more just like helping people do better business, staying on top of whatever their goals are going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say you do differently maybe compared to, I don't know, somebody that might be offering the same thing? What is your specific approach that is uniquely you, the kind of intention that you're coming to the table with?
So I think I come in with bespoke options for whoever I'm working with. I learn what their systems already are and how they operate. Some people that I work with, I know are not great on email. So we come up with other solutions.
Sure.
Just kind of down to how they work now and what's going to be effective for them long term. I don't ever want to come into a situation and say, hey, you have to do it this way. And then they're like, we don't work that way, lady. Like, this isn't going to happen,
Yeah.
And so I just provide options. I like to provide options. I don't come in heavy-handed. It's always a collaboration. And once I figure out how someone works or how a company works and what their end goal is, I can provide solutions. And they can pick, yeah, we like this. No, we hate this one. Okay, let's do it this way. And then ultimately it works.
Yeah. When you think about all of the experiences you've had throughout your career, did you ever find yourself in a position where you felt like you weren't being heard, you weren't being respected, you weren't being, X, Y, and Z because of the fact that you're a woman, because of whatever? Like, were there ever any moments like that for you?
I must say, I think I don't remember a time specifically where I didn't feel like I was being heard. I'm a pretty vocal person. I have expressed my feelings about a lot of things throughout my career, like to, my leaders, to people on my team, whatever. I think they heard me. Yeah. I don't know that they always agreed. I don't think they always, sometimes they were probably like, okay, Nicole, like we got it,
Sure.
So I don't know that there was ever a point where I didn't feel heard. And I also am fortunate that the whole like man-woman thing, to be honest, it never really registered in my brain because throughout my career, I've seen female department heads, I've seen female CFOs, you know what I mean? So there have been women in leadership positions. So that kind of never felt like a barrier for me personally. But I do remember one thing where I was in a meeting with two gentlemen, and one of them did not look at me the entire meeting. Oh, he only directed his conversation to the other man. And I distinctly remember that. But c'est la vie, whatever.
Well, I think that's actually, it's interesting because now we've seen so many of the top women executives within the industry were no longer in those positions. And I think for younger women who are coming into the industry and have all of these aspirations and want to be able to be at that level, I think there's this sense of like, is that even a possibility? Because I'm not seeing it. I think it's beautiful that you had the opportunity to see those kinds of people in those positions. And I think just due to the fact that you have a personality that is very outspoken, which I think is fantastic, that allowed you to progress in your life without necessarily maybe having to worry about, okay, well, I'm not, being respected in a way that I feel like is going to even allow me to continue having a career in the music industry. So I guess my question is, is there something that you would offer a young woman entering the industry right now who maybe is a little bit more timid, maybe is not as outspoken, for them to be able to consciously be thinking about and maybe even practicing like certain ways of presenting yourself in a social environment? What would be those things?
I think it's always important to present yourself respectfully, don't get wasted at the company party type of stuff, kind of basic things. But in terms of establishing yourself, whether you have, acquired a personality or not, you have to have advocates for you in whatever system you're in. So you can be the best, digital person there is out there, or you can be the best creative there is out there. But if people aren't advocating for you, a lot of times they'll be like, great, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Keep at it. So to grow to, whatever that means to you, get paid more, you get a different title, get more projects, you definitely need other people speaking for you as well as you advocating for yourself. I often refer to this example, but a long time ago, my dad told me to watch this YouTube clip of a woman named Carla Harris, who comes from the finance world. And of course, at the time I rolled my eyes and I was like, what does this have to do with me? I literally use this woman's words to this day. She does a lot of motivational speaking about business. And one of the key things that she talks about is how you need to have people advocating for you and speaking up for you when you're not in the room, because most of the decisions that get made about you are when you're not in the room. Whether, you know, the leadership team is going to hire you, whether they're going to fire you, whether they're going to give you a raise, those tend to happen when you're not around, and then they come to you and they tell you what's happening. So the impression that they have of you has to be a really great one if you want to grow, because they're talking about you when you're not there to speak up for yourself. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. Like, you need other people that are going to speak up on your behalf.
Yeah. And do you think that there is a way to, you know, because I think there's a lot of different ways to receive that level of, you know, people are advocating for you. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if maybe one of the paths is even mentorship. Mm-hmm. You know, because I've never had any mentors throughout my career, and that was always really that was always really difficult. I felt like I needed to constantly figure things out on my own. That never hindered people advocating for me. Okay. But now I'm, you know, like, one of the biggest reasons why I've stayed in the industry is because I want to be that mentor for other women who might necessarily not know what their path can look like in the industry, because mine has been a zigzag all over the place. You know, it was never a linear path. I never climbed the corporate ladder, you know? And I think more than ever, considering that now it feels like a lot more people are either becoming entrepreneurs or maybe are working for themselves, you know, on a freelance basis or something. I think it's even more important to seek out mentorship. Which again can ultimately lead to that advocation from other people. And I think it's also, you know, one of those things where this industry, sure, you can get ahead on your own to a certain extent, but I think it's so important to have people who are vouching for you. And also you can't do everything on your own. It's almost impossible. It is impossible. You know? So as much as I love DIY, I think you just need people at the end of the day.
You 100% need people. I agree with you 100%. You know, you can show up every day. You can present yourself respectfully. You can do the work. You can be excellent. You can participate. But that is only going to take you so far. And you definitely need other people kind of in your corner. You're in your network. I definitely think mentorship is important. I think coaching is important too. Coaching is more short term, and maybe sometimes from an outside perspective, looking in and saying, oh, you might want to try these things. But mentorship to me is more long term. And you can find that either specifically in a mentorship program. You know, She Is the Music comes to mind, right? But also just within people that are surrounding you. I would say one of my first mentors was my first boss, who happened to be a woman. But she is still in my life today. I'm still very good friends with her and her whole family. And I learned a lot of things from her, things to do, things not to do, just kind of being a sponge. So we never had a talk like, will you be my mentor? Yes, you know, but just by being around her, I learned so much. And then I have participated as a mentor in some of those programs, you know, whether it's like Grammy U stuff or She Is the Music, like I said. There are programs out there that you can reach into. Yeah.
I think this is actually an interesting transition to a question I had for you, which was success almost feeling quite isolating when you're at an executive level at a company or when you're an entrepreneur. And I wonder if there are people that you lean on or things that you're able to do outside of work that grounds you, that makes you feel like you're not alone, that if you're having a bad day or if something is just not going according to plan, that there is still something or somebody or people who you're able to lean on. So who would you say those people are, or activities that you're able to participate in?
100% you need those people. My family, I would say, grounds me. My family, you know, on occasion they think what I do is cool, or ask, you know, can you get me tickets to such and such concert? But by and large, like, I am just Nicole. They don't care at all. Yeah. And I'm really close with my family, even though they live 3,000 miles away. I see them often. So I think that grounds me, just knowing like who I am and where I come from and my family. But I also am really fortunate that I have some friends one that I came up in the business with that literally we were assistants together, and they've grown, the ladder to where they are now. I've done my thing. So I can always go back to them because they know the 20 plus years of me in this business. That helps a lot. And even some other people who maybe I haven't known as long, but have been an entrepreneur longer than I have, and just are willing to connect. I must say one thing that I noticed in myself since becoming an entrepreneur is how much more open and willing I am to do things like this, but also just collaborate with people, have lunch with someone, learn what they're doing, tell them what I'm doing. When you're in corporate, so to speak, at the labels, I think it comes with this responsibility that you kind of are like keeping the company secrets in a way. So whenever I would talk to somebody at that time, I would be me and I would share and stuff, but like you're always kind of just making sure you don't do too much or say too much, right? Now that I'm on my own, I mean, I'm like, who else can I meet with? You know what I mean? Like, this is great. So that's been freeing in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that your life now, being an entrepreneur, has, maybe you've always been this way, but do you think even if you weren't this type of person, do you think it's opened you up to being a perpetual learner, just somebody who constantly is seeking out new knowledge, new information, being able to grow over time, that sort of thing? Like, do you find yourself being that type of individual?
Absolutely. And I think you have to be, because nobody knows it all. And, you have to be open to learning new things, whether it's new terminology or like new ways to doing things. When I started my business, I had no idea at first, how do you set up your tax ID number? How do you manage your accounting? I had no idea. You figure it out and you have people that help you. But those were new skills that I had to learn. And I think you have to be open to learning new skills all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
What are some resources that you would recommend, outside of YouTube? So, are there resources that you've looked to that have been, valuable for you? I've
become a huge podcast person.
Awesome.
Now, I am always late to a trend. I don't think podcasts are a trend, but like always, I have been late to, when skinny jeans were becoming a thing, I was like, I will never wear skinny jeans. Then I wore skinny jeans. It was like, I'm always late to a thing. Podcasts, I was like, I'm never listening to podcasts. They're so stupid. And now all I do is listen to podcasts. So I acknowledge I'm late to these things. However, I think you can find good information in podcasts everywhere. Now, again, you have to take some of them with a grain of salt based on who's speaking and what their, experience and their, education is. But I've learned a ton through different podcasts. So that's probably one. And then, I had another and it slipped my mind now. I forget. I had another one too. Anyway, sorry.
It's okay. So podcasts are interesting now.
I think that's a big one for me, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, and having experts in your corner. Like I said, I didn't just make up my business accounting. Like I got with an accountant who explained to me what needed to happen. You know, you need professionals in whatever area you're challenged in. So obviously that would be one of them. I mentioned earlier, but I've been working with a small business coach on a couple of the things that I have found challenging, and he's helped me a lot in terms of, finding solutions that I'm comfortable with. I don't have to do things necessarily the way everyone else does. So that's been helpful for me. But yeah, I think those are the main ones.
Well, speaking of learning, what's maybe something you've unlearned? Either within this year or just maybe from starting your business until now, that has potentially shifted the way that you think about how you're approaching your life, your business, the way that you interact with, your partners and the relationships that you have in your life. Is there something that you've unlearned?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know in that context if there is something I have unlearned.
Is there something maybe in your personal life you've unlearned that in some way is feeding into your professional life?
I mean, I definitely think growth comes with changes. And, you know, it's funny because I've noticed patterns in my life, not just professionally, but you know, I did 10 years, give or take, in New York. And then I got an opportunity to go to Interscope in LA. And I was like, okay, I don't want to go to LA, but it's a great job offer. I can't turn it down. I'm going to go for 3 years. And then it was another 3 years. And then I was at Interscope Geffen for 10 years. And then I decided to leave. So I feel like every 10 years, there's like a transformation happening in my life, which comes with growth and changes and things you learn, but also, you know, things you lose. So maybe that's it. That just like acknowledging those patterns and accepting change is good.
Yeah. Is there something that, you know, not the typical sort of like, what sort of advice do you have for people who are either in the industry right now, but maybe are finding themselves in a crossroads, or people who are just wanting to enter the industry? But I think more importantly, is there something that you want people to remember about you, the type of individual that you are at the end of the day, you know, outside of all of the fancy titles and everything, like just something that you want people to remember you by?
I would say that I show up. I show up, you know, every day to the job or to life or to whatever the task is. You know, I show up. And just that I care. You know, I have said so many times throughout my career, I just need to care less, because things, will bother me so much, you know, whether it's another individual not performing to their potential, or, you know, an artist delivering a record late, or whatever the situation is, because there's always a fire to be put out. I care so much that it like literally has affected me many times. And I've just said to myself, Nicole, you just got to care less. Like, care less, and I just can't do it. So I think it's that I care, that I show up, that I, you know, good intentions, but I would say those things.
Well, that resonates with me so much, and it makes me feel a little bit better about myself, because I also care too much, and it gets to the point where it starts to negatively affect the way I feel, and it just gets in the way of me being able to move forward in any given context. But ultimately, I think if you want to do great work, and if you want to do great work with great people, that takes a lot of care, and it takes a lot of attention and attention to detail, like we talked about earlier. You know, you can't just sort of willy-nilly do these things and then think that you're going to be, you know, super successful in your career. It is a lot of hard work, but I think beneath that hard work is a level of care that goes beyond, you know, any sort of day-to-day level of care. Which is a lot to take on.
For sure. It is for sure. I think, you know, I have a few people in my life that often say to me, and have for many years, Nicole, you can't expect everyone to be you. And I don't think I expect people to be me, but I often subconsciously expect people to like operate at the level of where I am at. And not meaning that I'm at a higher level, because there's people way smarter, way more productive, way more anything than me. But I just expect kind of the same energy. And not everyone has that energy. Or maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe something happened at home. Like, you just don't know. And I now am way more conscious of that than I used to be.
So do you think it's more standard than expectation for you, that you have a certain level of standard?
I think that's what it is. For sure.
And it is hard to find people who can match that. But then when you do, it's like magic. You know, you're able to come together and make work and do things that feel, I'm sure, so fulfilling. Right? The fact that we have just, you know, 5 minutes left, I'm curious to know what's next for 81B? What are some goals that you've set for yourself going into 2026? Because obviously after the Latin Grammys, it's like everything shuts down in the music industry. Yeah. So I guess how do you utilize that time for yourself when people are vacationing and holidays and all of that?
Yep.
And then how are you looking ahead into 2026? What are some of those, like, let's say top 3 goals that you have for yourself?
Well, I definitely want to continue working with people, companies, and projects that I care about and I have a passion for. Like I said before, I've been very fortunate that in these first 2 years, the partners that I've had, I love, and I love kind of all the things we're doing, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like it's been awesome. So I hope that can continue with additional people. So I definitely want to set up 2026 to bring in more business, because now that I've got a handle on, my day-to-day, how I'm structured, I have the bandwidth to take on more now. So that's exciting to me. I didn't want to start off and drown myself. So now I'm like, okay, like I kind of got a handle on things. So I want to continue that. I do want to expand in terms of personnel. Like I would love to take on a few people to broaden the work that we can do, for sure. Like full-time.
So you don't have staff at the moment. It is just you.
Right now it's just me full-time.
Okay. Yeah.
I do work with other subcontractors, but no one that is like an employee of me.
Yeah.
So that would be another goal of mine for sure. And then what's the third one?
Is there something even personally for yourself that you're looking forward to for 2026?
I mean, anything and everything related to my son.
Yeah.
He's just the best. I take him everywhere. That's definitely one thing, particularly being a single parent. It does take a village. We have a great support system and community, but he has shown up on Zooms with me. He has come to lunch meetings with me. Fortunate for me, people that I'm meeting with, are excited and happy and willing to, that I do that. But yeah, just anything and everything with him.
Well, knowing that now, I'm like, you could have brought him in.
I know. Listen, he's at the age now where he'd be running around climbing on things, causing a whole ruckus.
And I imagine too that this new chapter of your life and having a child, that also is, allowing you to learn new things about yourself and the type of individual that you are. And then that again feeds into your professional life and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So, I mean, multitasking is a real thing.
One of my closest friends also recently had a baby, and she told me, she was like, I used to think that I was busy, but I was never busy until I had my child. Yeah. So is that something that you feel is accurate for yourself too?
Yes, but I think it's busy in a different way. Like I used to be busy multitasking things that I wanted to do. I want to go get my hair done. I want to go work out. I want to go on vacation. Now I'm multitasking things that he needs, plus my job and everything else. So yeah, it's definitely different.
Well, this was so wonderful, Nicole. Thank you so much for making the time and for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking me.
This was such an honor. I hope that I can have other Armenians on the show. I'm like desperately trying to find other Armenians in the industry.
Oh, I know a few.
Please recommend them, because I would love to have them on the show. But thank you again so much for making the time. Really appreciate you, and hope we can stay in touch moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks.
Well, this does it for this month's episode of Her Vision, Her Voice. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will be back for another episode on October 18th. You can find the entire set list from the first hour of the show on the WRLD website when the archived episode is out next week. I'm Nicole Bilzerian, and this is Her Vision, Her Voice. Stay tuned for Beats of All Nations and more WRLD programming coming up. Have a great weekend, everyone.